Hey, Steelers Nation. Joe Rockey here with the Pittsburgh Syndicate. And draft day, obviously the whole weekend was awesome, but I feel like this will be a really good time to take stock. Where do the Steelers line up in terms of the rest of the division? So I'm going to try to be as realistic as possible and trying to take my black and gold glasses off in my starting assessment of where we're at so we can compare ourselves to everyone else. We're a team that on offense has basically all potential that has not been proven yet. So there is a ton of upside. George Pickens could become an elite top 5 receiver if we get him the ball more. Najee was on fire in December, and Warren, when he hit his stride getting used to the offense, showed an amazing game out of the running backs position. We have already had one of the best tight ends in the room, and then we just added an absolute stud in Darrell Washington to it. The real question is, will the left tackle be able to hold up? Again, personally, I believe Dan Moore's going to be a starter on opening day, which, again, is middle of the road. He is not top 10. He is not bottom 10. He is middle of the road in terms of left tackles in the NFL. That's just where the rest of the league is at, people. So when I look at this offensively, where is the realistic points per game number? It's probably somewhere between 17 and 23. I mean, realistically, that's where you're at. And when you're playing top-end defense, it's going to be shaded down. And that might even be an optimistic number. I mean, remember, this team had trouble scoring against Carolina and Atlanta at the end of last year. There's a major glass ceiling that comes from the coordinator position upon this offense. But looking upon the talent of the team, I think that that's the fair assessment. When we look at the defense, on the other hand, best pass rushing tandem in the NFL, immense back-end safety in Minka, and a cornerback room that has a Hall of Famer on one side and 3 options on the other side between Wallace, Porter Jr., and Witherspoon. Wallace, is an above-average quality corner. And then both Witherspoon and Porter have shown or project to, in Porter's case, to be all pro level talent. Witherspoon needs to stay healthy. Porter needs to not have penalties in his game. If both of them are able to do that, you have four just massively above average, borderlining all pro cornerbacks in your room. That's really how you stop Cincinnati when combined with the pass rush. So let's dive into the rest of the division. And for those Bengals fans, Ravens fans, and the 3 Brown fans out there, this is going to be as honest as I can be. Again, trying to take my black and gold glasses off. And I'm going to start with the real threat, the Bengals. Obviously, the whole team revolves around Chase and Burrow. It's the way that it is. You throw the fact that they also drafted in a very nice replacement receiver to get rid of Boyd. The Bengals offense is not going anywhere. They are building themselves in the exact same vein as the Peyton Manning Colts were. 2 electric receivers, an above average third, and then a running game just when we feel like throwing you off a little bit. The Bengals realistically should be putting up at minimum 24 a game. I mean, there's no real way you're slowing this team down unless you sack Burrow. And that's the only way you can stop them. So when I look at this, and I look at the rest of the division, I don't see the fact that Baltimore's not getting there. And Myles Garrett's the most overrated pass rusher in football. They aren't getting there either in Cleveland. So then we look at what Cincinnati did on the defensive side of the ball. They went out and got one of the absolute best pass rushers in this draft. Miles out of Clemson falling to them was just absolutely horrible for us. That run on wide receivers in the second half, around 20-ish or so, really, really hurt us because Miles is a beast. That guy can put pressure on. And we're just going to see what happens there. But they, like I said, they're built like the Indianapolis Colts. That's their Dwight Freeney and Mathis. They just drafted their Dwight Freeney. So are you going to be able to throw over the top of them and beat them? Possibly. But the one thing that's always true is if you run at them and control the ball, you can slow them down. Do I think the Steelers are going to be able to do that? That's by far and away the toughest matchup we have. And it really does come down to, does either Witherspoon or Porter step up to that all-pro level? If either of them do, and Wallace is now covering the third, you have yourself a realistic possibility of slowing down the Bengals. Then it just comes down to Canada at the end of the day. And so much of this team for the Steelers comes down to the combination of Canada or Kenny, however you want to draw that line. But it's the effectiveness of the offense. And do you think that they can do it? So I think that the Bengals, you cannot 100% guarantee, say, hey, we're jumping them, because I don't think there's any credibility of even trying to notion that. The team down in Maryland, on the other hand, had the absolute worst weekend that ESPN loves of all time. According to ESPN, they won the offseason, guys. They got Odell Beckham Jr. They just gave Lamar a stupid amount of money. By the way, for the episode that I released on Friday, whenever I was saying get the Maryland cornerback, and I totally missed that he got taken 24th, the reason for that was when Baltimore drafted a wide receiver in the first round, I literally had to leave the room because I couldn't stop laughing. I, outside of being the host of the Pittsburgh Steelers Syndicate, run a business where I help people's business cultures take the next level and make success. The Baltimore Ravens are building a cauldron of explosion, and they basically just put the last piece over the top. They might have a great offense for 3 weeks, and that'll be about it. Odell Beckham Jr. has the history of destroying locker rooms. If he doesn't get the ball often enough, or well enough, quite frankly, he will rip teams apart. Eli Manning is a borderline Hall of Famer. And Odell Beckham was never satisfied having him throw him the ball. He took this job at Baltimore because no one else was willing to give him a job. That's a fact. Part of why they weren't willing to give him a job was his personality. Remember, no job last year at all. Part of that was recovering from the ACL, but he was healthy enough to go and give someone a playoff run, but they were recognizing he is not capable of being in a business culture. Then let's look at who's throwing him a ball. A quarterback who cannot throw the ball. Lamar Jackson does not throw passes that are not college open. He will not force it in there. He just gets a lot of passes that are college open because defenses are scared to death of him running against them. So we have an inaccurate quarterback who doesn't like forcing the ball into tight holes, a diva wide receiver who is no longer healthy or young enough to get open himself regularly, who doesn't think that, who will be complaining when he's not the number one target. And then they just put a true and better receiver on the team. Tell me a situation where Odell Beckham does not explode and bring Lamar Jackson down with him. I don't see it's possible. I know they have a Hall of Fame coach in Harbaugh. And Harbaugh is, in general, pretty good at keeping things under wrap. Dude, they just created a nuclear bomb. Not to mention the fact they lost half of their offensive line, and they did not adequately replace it. So when we look at the Ravens, they also didn't get a corner. That should be noted too. They basically made this entire offseason to placate a guy that never should have re-signed. He's going to destroy this city. And oh, by the way, he has been a starter for 4 years. He's only played against the Steelers 3 times. So for every person who goes out there, nah, he plays in the big game, he don't get hurt as much as you think he does. 3 times in 8 years. 3 times out of 8 opportunities. 3 times in 4 years he has played against the Steelers. Oh, and by the way, he's 1-2 in those games. Baltimore placated a guy who they were the only person who would have taken him as their starting quarterback. They sold out to him. They brought in a time bomb in Odell Beckham Jr., and then they just threw accelerant on it by throwing another wide receiver on top of it. Baltimore is not finishing above 3rd place in this division. No chance whatsoever. Lamar Jackson and Odell Beckham will explode. If you take the ideal perfect scenario on paper. Neither one of them get hurt. They're all happy and cozy. That offense still is not going to be scoring at a proportionate rate that their defense doesn't blow games. That defense, even though they paid for Roquan, is not an elite defense anymore. It does not get to the quarterback. It cannot cover. And Cincinnati is going to torch them. So when I look at this and say, where's Baltimore getting their wins at? Well, that's why there's a fourth team in the division, ain't there, guys? I mean, everything with Cleveland comes down to Watson. There's no way around it. And he was absolutely horrible in the 6 games he played in last year. He looked like a guy who hadn't played forever. Now this year, he will have changed that. Cleveland had no real high-end draft picks. They were combing through defensive tackles on the back end to try to find some hope of stopping the run. And relying upon a rookie to do that when he is the only run stopper on your team doesn't really work. It's a team that's been ravaged by free agency and signing Watson. And they have one player who's potentially an all-pro player, granted at the most important position, but there's nothing really of super high-end quality around them. If you go around and make an all-division team out of give me the best quarterback, best of every position, aside from maybe Garrett Wilson over Highsmith, I don't think the Browns have one. Of the entire division, someone you'd say he's the best of the 4 of them at. You know, obviously Burrow's the quarterback and Chase is the receiver. The running back's probably Dobbins. All right, so we just went off the other 3 teams really easy. Dobbins and Cleveland's running back from Georgia, they're not that much different. I mean, it's not a guarantee that Dobbins isn't the right answer. Cleveland went all in on a guy, much like Baltimore, except they have a worse cast around him. And at least Baltimore has draft picks to try to build around him one day, if he's healthy in Baltimore. Won't be, but, have fun. Cleveland has no realistic opportunity of seeing that this thing's going to turn around. They saw their draft pick turn into the absolute best pass rusher in the draft on Thursday night when it became Anderson becoming 3rd overall. That would have helped the Browns. Cleveland's bought an asset, not able to support it, and are going to truffle through. Yes, I know Cleveland went 3-3 in the division last year, including splitting with the Steelers. I don't see a way that happens again. I don't see a way that Cleveland does not earn a top 10 pick, finish last in this division, and basically because their because their owner threw their GM under the bus and forced that trade, I don't see a way they don't clean house again. And then Cleveland's back in the same rotation, new coaches trying to put their own system on tools that aren't really capable of running the new system. And that's how we had the circling around the brown toilet bowl for 15 years. That cycle of new leadership, new coaches, doesn't care what you are. You're trying to adapt to my system and my format no matter what. Well, I don't see a way that that's not happening. Cleveland is way closer to becoming a top 10 pick than they are to becoming second in this division. So all in all, where does the math of that lead? I think it's pretty straightforward. It's either us or Cincinnati, guys. Can we sack Burrow? Can we cover Chase? Can we cover Higgins? That's what it's going to come down to. I do think that Broderick Jones is the absolute best kind of tackle, though, to take out the one that Cincinnati just drafted. So while I do think he will tear up a lot of the league, he ain't going to get through Jones. Like, those two are built to be compatible together, which is kind of cool. But when I look at this overall, Cincinnati has to be the one we care about. They have to be the one that's there. Baltimore hit the implosion button, but no one implodes better than those Cleveland Browns. By the way, the Cleveland Browns have not won a regular season game in Pittsburgh since they came back. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go.